September 25th, classes be cancelled and buildings be closed off, allowing students and staff to stay home. Yiannopoulos and a former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon are set to give speeches during Free Speech Week. To discuss all of this, let's bring in Milo Yiannopoulos, a political commentator and author of the book Dangerous. Milo, good to have you with us. And Milo, you're promoting Good to have you with us, Milo. You're promoting free speech. Some faculty members calling for a boycott. What's your reaction?
Well, it sort of demonstrates my point, the point that I write about in the book, and the whole reason to do Free Speech Week in the first place. My contention is that American higher education has moved away from its original mission of challenging and broadening young minds, and instead become a sort of therapy session, a therapy session for the professors and for the students too. It's become somewhere that people go to be insulated from new ideas instead of to be exposed to them. So Free Speech Week will introduce a lot of conservative and libertarian superstars, big and popular campus speakers like Ann Coulter, who is a 12-time New York Times best-selling author, me, Steve Bannon, and a bunch of other people too, to expose Berkeley's students to points of view that their professors are not teaching them. They're getting a very restricted sort of education when they're not exposed to conservative or libertarian points of view. And we intend to bring those points of view to campus to give students the education that they're paying for but not receiving from Berkeley.
And of course, this has caused a lot of controversy. A few weeks ago, the mayor of Berkeley urged the university to cancel your appearance, saying he was afraid of the violence, that anti-fascists will use large protests to create mayhem, that it's going to cost a lot of money to keep things secure. Many are echoing these concerns that there'll be clashes between your opponents and supporters. And that, of course, was the reason that your speaking engagement was cancelled earlier this year. So, Milo, are we now in a place where we let the mere threat of violence from those that disagree with you and others now control freedom of expression? Are we nearing dangerous territory where the brute force of the loudest mob, if you will, defines when and whether Americans are free to express unpopular ideas? Is this where we're at now?
Well, it's worse than even you suggest, because it's not about being free to express unpopular ideas. My ideas are very popular. Most Americans agree with me about free speech and about free expression, the First and the Second Amendment. Most Americans are firmly in support of free expression, which is the whole point of Free Speech Week. It's actually worse than you suggest. It is a small contingent of very influential and powerful far left establishment types, the people who run universities, you know, the mayor, by the way, who's friends with the by any means necessary group that violently shut down the event last time. And he tweeted that I was a white nationalist and had to retract it and apologize after egging on protesters basically to smash the town up last time. He suddenly realized after $500,000 worth of damage was done to Berkeley, maybe it wasn't such a good idea for him to be encouraging them with lies after all. You know, now the Kafkaesque situation we find ourselves in is that the left is punishing me for a problem they created themselves. Berkeley's trying to charge me tens of thousands of dollars in security fees so that my audience and my speakers are safe from violence that Berkeley itself has nurtured and encouraged. UC Berkeley leaked my speaker list. They leaked the fact that Steve Bannon, Ann Coulter and I would all be speaking during Berkeley Free Speech Week. The only possible explanation, the only reasonable thing you can come to, the only way this makes sense is that they were trying to give a heads up to domestic terrorists to increase the resistance to this event, to drum up opposition, and to give Antifa and the Black Bloc protesters who violently shut down the speech of conservatives and libertarians a heads up. UC Berkeley are in cahoots with these people. Well, unfortunately, that runs afoul of their First Amendment commitments. They're not entitled to machinate against conservatives to ban their opinions from campus. And I don't have any particularly outrageous points of view. My views are shared by millions of ordinary Americans. They're simply not views that are popular with college professors, let's say, and with journalists. Well, tough. You're going to have to get used to it, UC Berkeley.
Well, you know, perhaps they published your list to give you more publicity. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But, you know, Milo, there's all this talk about the mental...
I think UC Berkeley has demonstrated they're not worth the benefit of the doubt.
Well, you know, you do hear all of this talk about the mental safety of students that could be traumatized by hearing you, that there's going to be counseling available ahead of your appearance and ahead of the political commentator Ben Shapiro. But before you laugh, I mean, is there a double standard here when counseling isn't offered on campuses ahead of liberal speakers? You had a Muslim American activist, Linda Sarsour. She's called for jihad against the Trump administration.
Well,
do you think there's a double standard, not taking the sensitivities of conservative students equally?
I don't think conservatives get themselves in a tizzy just because somebody who disagrees with them is speaking. I don't need counselling after I hear Linda Sarsour speak. I just need a bucket. You know, conservatives are generally a lot more resistant to different ideas, and they tend to embrace being challenged. Well, the problem is that these, as I said at the beginning of the segment, these places have become therapy culture. There's somewhere you go to run away from new ideas instead of engaging with new ideas. And the particular brand of sort of far-left social justice leftism that is being taught at these schools, which involves a variety of conspiracy theories about the patriarchy, about white supremacy, all this kind of stuff, that these moral panics, like acid rain and satanic child abuse. It's a moral panic, you know. This stuff that is drummed up, inculcated in these kids, the kids are probably scared to death. It's not the students that I blame. I don't blame a young 20 or 21-year-old who's at UC Berkeley, who has been told by his professors that the biggest threat to his safety is, you know, these scary conservative speakers. I blame the professors, and I blame the administrators. And if UC Berkeley will not meet its First Amendment obligations, then it has to be it has to have its federal funding withdrawn. And if Free Speech Week does not proceed and the 4 days of Free Speech Week are not successfully executed,
that when we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad, that we are struggling against tyrants and rulers, not only abroad in the Middle East or in the other side of the world, but here in these United States of America, where you have fascists and white supremacists and Islamophobes reigning in the White House.
Sarsour's supporters maintain the word causing fierce backlash has been taken out of context, and that she's also been fighting back, tweeting, "Right wing tries to demonize my leadership. Editing videos is their favorite pastime." Here now, Ben Shapiro is editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com, and Hassan Shibli is chief executive director of CARE Florida, a friend of Ms. Sarsour's, and was president when she made the comment. So, Hassan, let me start with you. Tell me how it was taken out of context.
Well, jihad means to struggle for good, and she was very clear that it's our duty as Americans and as Muslims to put forward our best effort and to struggle to speak truth to power, to help the disenfranchised, to stand for the oppressed, no matter what the cost is of speaking out. And she's actually paying the price of speaking out and calling out the Trump administration's attacks on minorities, attacks against women. Linda's a revolutionary American Muslim, proud, hijab sporting activist, and we stand with her. We're proud of the tremendous work she's doing to stand with all disenfranchised minorities to make America great by standing for justice and speaking truth to power, which is exactly what jihad is about.
Okay, so I first read about this on the Daily Wire, but when you wrote about it, Ben, tell me why you think that it was not taken out of context when she calls for jihad against the White House.
Well, I mean, it clearly wasn't taken out of context. Everybody I know who posted this story posted the entire video as well as a large portion of the transcript from what she said. I don't think anybody is claiming that she openly called for violence against President Trump, but jihad means more than just internal struggle or quote-unquote struggle for good. I mean, we all know that there are terrorists all over the world who invoke the word jihad as justification for what they do, and Linda Sarsour knows that too. I mean, she knows how to make a headline. She is a radical anti-Semite who has backed terrorists in the past. She's a person who has said that I
Stop smearing her. Don't smear a woman who's not here to defend herself. You just don't like a vocal American Muslim woman proudly standing for justice. Don't smear a woman who's not here to defend herself. Shame on you.
Okay, I'll talk about CARE instead. CARE is an organization that was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation.
Right, shift the topic. Exactly. Never indicted. Don't try to drown out the conversation. Let's talk about what jihad means. Jihad means striving for truth.
Let me ask you, Hassan,
exactly what
Hassan, let me ask you something.
If you want to talk about context, let's talk about the full context.
Yes, go ahead and ask me.
Okay, this is what I want to ask you.
The fact that she began this speech by praising a guy who has in the past talked about how jihad includes violent jihad. She started her speech with that. So let's not pretend that you can just, you're the one taking this one line out of context and then suggesting that it only refers to
I encourage everybody just to listen to the speech for herself.
So I listened to it, and I have a question to you from a communication standpoint. So she wants to be an effective activist. Surely she is aware that when the general public hears the word jihad, it's not necessarily about an internal struggle and standing up for people's rights. I mean, we do that all the time in America, like our country's actually built on that. So I'm curious why she doesn't think that she would get some backlash. If you're going to say those things, you are going to get, stir up a hornet's nest.
Well, that's why it's so important that she used that word, because we must reclaim that word from the extremists that have misdefined it and misrepresented it. So Muslim extremists and anti-Muslim extremists have both hijacked and distorted jihad to mean something horrible, to mean exactly what jihad does not mean, actually. And the only way we can reclaim our words and reclaim our language is by leaders proudly and unapologetically using it in the right context, so we can show the world what jihad really means. Jihad does not mean war,
I think that you're like
war.
Whistling past the graveyard, because like that's already the reclamation, Ben. It's too late for that.
Of course,
no, it isn't too late. It isn't too late. It isn't too late.
Okay, if it isn't too late, then I'd like to hear CARE come out right now and condemn the Muslim Brotherhood.
Why would we condemn the Muslim Brotherhood? We don't condemn political organizations. Listen, let's not, again, every single time you want to try to distort the conversation. Why don't you condemn the KKK? Why don't you condemn the Lord's Resistance Army? Every time a Muslim comes up, you start condemning. You start asking Muslims to condemn. Muslims are human beings. We're proud Americans. We stand for peace. We stand for justice. We condemn all people. We condemn all people who engage in violence against human beings, against civilians. Take that for granted. We are one humanity, one people. Let's get to know each other. Let's not promote fear and hate of each other.
All right, Hassan, I'll give the last word to you, Ben.
Okay, if you want to reclaim the word jihad, you should start by condemning organizations that promote jihad all over the world instead of associating with them, praising
Why would
them,
we,
and talking about
again, you're misdefining jihad. Jihad means standing for justice. Jihad means standing for justice. It doesn't mean terrorism. And we stand against all terrorists and all those who engage in violence.
Organizations that participate in it. This is not hard.
We have and we do, just as everybody else does. Thank you, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you, Hassan, and Ben Shapiro. Thank you so much. See you next week.